The bridge of the massive alien space station hummed with a low, constant buzz, the air thick with tension. High-ranking officials stood around a gleaming holographic table, their faces a mix of concern and impatience. At the head of the table, an imposing figure, General Varnak, spoke in a deep, commanding voice, detailing the Galactic Empire's upcoming diplomatic mission. The stakes were high. The mission was to send Princess Aria to Earth to negotiate an alliance with the humans. The princess, known across the galaxy for her beauty and intellect, was seen as a symbol of the Empire's strength. Earth's resources were coveted, and this negotiation could tip the balance of power in favor of the Empire. But just as the plans were being finalized, a voice cut through the tense atmosphere. "Princess Aria has made a request," said Commander Lyra, the princess's most trusted advisor. "She will only board a human ship." The room fell silent. A low murmur spread through the council as officials exchanged confused glances. General Varnak's expression hardened as he turned to Lyra. "Explain yourself, Commander. Why would she refuse our most advanced ships? This is a matter of utmost importance." Commander Lyra hesitated, her eyes flicking nervously around the room. "She insists. She believes that only a human ship will do." The room erupted into chaos. How could the princess, one of the Empire's most respected figures, request such an outrageous thing? The humans, who had always been considered primitive by most of the galaxy, had never been seen as worthy of such trust. They were weak, unrefined, and still caught in the chaos of their own wars. Why would she choose them over the Empire's finest vessels? Have the humans been in contact with her? General Varnak's voice was sharp, his patience running thin. "No, General," Lyra replied, her voice quiet. "There has been no communication with Earth. The princess simply believes something different about humanity. She's heard tales, stories of their resilience, their courage, and how they've managed to survive in the harshest of environments. She believes that they possess something that we do not." The general frowned, unable to comprehend what the princess could see in the humans. For centuries, the Empire had ruled over countless worlds, and their technology far surpassed anything Earth had ever developed. Yet the princess seemed convinced that these humans, who were still trapped in their primitive state, had something of value. This decision could jeopardize everything. A flashback to Princess Aria's youth played in her mind. She remembered stories passed down through her family about the first human explorers who had journeyed to distant planets and survived the unthinkable, how they had faced death itself and come out victorious. She recalled the tales of humans fighting off entire alien invasions with sheer grit and determination, sometimes at the cost of their lives. Humanity's struggle, its will to survive, had always fascinated her. The way they refused to give up, no matter how bleak their chances seemed, had inspired her from a young age. And it was not just the stories that made her feel this way. There was something about humans that intrigued her. She had once seen a human soldier in battle. He had fought with an intensity that left her breathless. His courage, his willingness to lay down his life for his people, had ignited something inside her. He was no different from the legends, but he was real. In that moment, she knew that humanity's strength went beyond their technology. It was in their spirit. The council continued to argue, voices rising with frustration. They could not understand why the princess would insist on this seemingly ridiculous condition. To them, it was a sign of weakness, an inexplicable preference for the unknown. General Varnak stood from the table, slamming his fist down in anger. "This is madness. The princess's request is insubordinate, and it could endanger our plans." Lyra bowed her head in acknowledgement of the general's anger. "I will speak with her again, General, but the princess has made up her mind. She insists on a human ship." The conversation shifted to another point, but Aria's decision lingered in everyone's mind. The tension was palpable, and though no one said it aloud, the council feared that the princess's insistence on a human vessel could be more than just a personal preference. It could be a sign of something deeper, something dangerous. Could the princess be swayed by the humans' perceived strength? Could she be considering switching allegiances? The thought was chilling, and it sent a ripple of unease through the council. Meanwhile, on Earth, a different scene was unfolding. Captain James sat in the command center of the Vanguard, a ship that had been newly outfitted with the latest human technology. He had no idea that his mission would soon alter the course of his life forever. His orders were simple: retrieve Princess Aria and bring her back to Earth for the upcoming negotiations. It was a prestigious mission, one that many officers would have given anything to command, but for James, it was just another assignment. His crew was ready, the ship was prepared, and everything seemed normal. But as he looked out the viewport at the stars, a strange feeling crept over him. There was something about this mission that didn't sit right with him. He could not shake the feeling that there was more to Princess Aria's request than met the eye. What could possibly make her so insistent on traveling only aboard a human ship? Captain James dismissed the thought, but it gnawed at him. As the Vanguard prepared to launch, he felt a strange sense of foreboding. Little did he know, his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. This was not just another diplomatic mission. This was the beginning of something much greater, something that would challenge everything he knew about humanity, loyalty, and survival. And in the cold silence of space, the first whispers of a new chapter in galactic history began to stir. Captain James stood on the command deck of the Vanguard, staring at the gleaming expanse of space beyond the thick glass viewport. The stars twinkled like distant diamonds, but his mind was focused on the mission ahead. It was a prestigious assignment, bringing Princess Aria back to Earth. The Galactic Empire had never requested a human ship before, and the fact that she insisted on traveling aboard his ship made James feel both honored and uneasy. As the captain of one of Earth's most advanced vessels, he was used to dealing with dangerous missions. The Vanguard was a marvel of human engineering, equipped with the latest in advanced technology. Cloaking devices, powerful engines, and cutting-edge weaponry were just a few of its impressive features. It was a ship built for stealth, combat, and survival. Everything a captain like James could ever want. But something about this mission felt different. There was an unspoken tension in the air, a sense of unease that made James question whether he was truly ready for the journey ahead. The crew was already busy preparing the ship for departure. James walked along the gleaming corridors, past the bustling engineering team and the quiet, focused communications officers. They all seemed confident, but James couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. His eyes kept darting back to the briefing papers on his tablet. Princess Aria had requested specifically a human ship. Why? It seemed strange. She could have easily traveled on any of the Empire's finest warships, but she insisted on Earth's most advanced vessel. It didn't add up. As he entered the command center, his first officer, Lieutenant Harris, approached him with a concerned look. "Captain, the Vanguard is ready for launch. We're just waiting for the final clearance." "Good," James replied, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. He took a seat at the captain's chair and glanced over the crew's activity on the monitors. The Vanguard was an impressive sight. Its sleek, dark hull reflected the distant light of the stars, and its advanced cloaking technology made it nearly invisible to any sensors. Perfect for sneaking past enemy territory, or in this case, carrying out a delicate diplomatic mission. As the crew continued their preparations, James allowed himself a moment to think. What did Princess Aria see in humans? Most alien species, especially those as advanced as the Galactic Empire, viewed humans as primitive. Earth had just begun to scratch the surface of space exploration, and while humanity had shown remarkable progress in a short time, they were still far from mastering the universe. So why would someone like Princess Aria, a being of extraordinary power and intelligence, choose a human ship over the Empire's technology? Beside him stood Lieutenant Pearson, his face grim, but his eyes burning with determination. "We've trained for this moment our entire lives," Pearson said, his voice steady despite the tension. "This is the last chance we've got. If we fail now, it's over." Hunter nodded, but his mind was racing. They had lost so much already. Bonner's death weighed heavily on him. Monroe's betrayal felt like a wound that would never heal. But in that moment, Hunter knew what he had to do. The world was counting on him, on them. He couldn't afford to lose focus now. "Status report," Hunter barked, turning to his communications officer. "Sir, the Zarkian fleet is approaching the planet's surface. They've launched several waves of heavy assault ships. Our fleet is assembling in the outer orbit, but they're outnumbered. We've already lost several ships in the initial skirmish." Hunter's blood boiled as he stared at the screen. The Zarkians were relentless, but they were underestimating humanity. For centuries, Earth had been ridiculed, mocked, and dismissed as weak. But now, it was humanity's time to prove them all wrong. "All units, prepare for launch," Hunter commanded, his voice now firm. "We are not going down without a fight. Engage the enemy with everything you've got." The communication lines buzzed as the commanders of Earth's remaining forces replied. There was no time to waste. The war had already begun, and the outcome would be decided in the coming hours. As the orders were sent out, Hunter turned back to the main screen. He watched the movements of their fleet, the humans preparing for one final assault. The plan was risky, but it was their best shot. The Zarkians had already made their move, launching massive fleets into the atmosphere. They had planned to bombard Earth's surface with laser strikes, targeting cities and military installations to cripple humanity's resistance. But they hadn't expected what was coming. "Captain, we've detected an anomaly," a technician said, interrupting his thoughts. "A cloaked ship in orbit. It appears to be our own." Hunter's eyes widened. "Our cloaking technology. It's working?" "Yes, sir. It's fully operational," the technician confirmed. Hunter's heart skipped a beat. This was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. Humanity's cloaking technology was their secret weapon. With it, their ships could hide from the Zarkians, appearing invisible until it was too late. It was a risky strategy, but it was the only way to even the odds against the overwhelming Zarkian fleet. "We can use this to our advantage," Hunter said, his voice low but full of conviction. "Prepare the fleet. We'll move into position and strike when they least expect it." The command center buzzed with activity as the final preparations were made. Hunter took a deep breath, focusing on the mission ahead. They had no other choice now. They had to win, or humanity would be lost forever. Meanwhile, high above Earth, the Zarkian fleet loomed in the skies, their ships massive and intimidating. Commander Kalar watched the planet below, a cruel smile crossing his alien face. He believed this would be easy. The humans had always been weak. The Zarkians had wiped out entire civilizations without breaking a sweat. But Earth's resistance had surprised him. He had been briefed about the humans' new cloaking technology, but Kalar was confident that his fleet would be more than a match for them. What he didn't anticipate was the resilience of the human spirit, the fire that burned within their hearts. He had underestimated them. "Sir, we've detected strange energy readings from the planet," one of his officers reported. "It seems like cloaked ships are approaching." Kalar's smile faltered. He had been too arrogant. He had not taken into account the possibility of a counterattack. But now it was too late to back down. The Zarkians had to win. "Engage full firepower," Kalar ordered, his voice cold. "Destroy their ships before they can launch their assault." Hunter's team was in position, the ships cloaked and hidden in the shadows of the Zarkian fleet. They were ready. He could feel the tension in the air, the sense that this moment would decide everything. They were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for Earth's future, for their families, for everything they had ever known. The princess's ship was still far off, but James couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would mark a turning point for both Earth and the Galactic Empire. What did she see in humanity? Was it just a fleeting interest, or did she see something deeper, something that no one else in the galaxy had ever noticed? The more he thought about it, the more uncertain he became. Humans were still relatively young in the eyes of the galaxy, and their technology, while advanced, was nothing compared to the wonders of the Galactic Empire. Yet here she was, choosing to travel with humans. The ship's communication system suddenly beeped, breaking James's thoughts. Lieutenant Davis, the communications officer, had an urgent message. "Captain, we've just received a transmission from Princess Aria's ship. She wants to speak with you before we reach the rendezvous point." James's heart skipped a beat. He had expected the princess to remain distant, focused on her mission, but this was different. She wanted to speak with him directly. Why? He stood up and walked toward the communication panel. As the screen flickered to life, he saw her. Princess Aria was even more stunning in person than he had imagined. Her otherworldly beauty was undeniable, with long, flowing hair that shimmered like silver under the artificial lights of her ship. Her eyes were a striking shade of violet, filled with intelligence and mystery. She exuded an aura of power and grace, yet there was a softness to her expression that seemed to invite conversation. "Captain James," she said, her voice like a soft melody. "I trust the Vanguard is in good condition." "Yes, Princess," James replied, trying to keep his composure. "We're ready for the journey. I'll make sure we reach the rendezvous point without delay." Her eyes lingered on him for a moment, as if searching for something in his expression. "I appreciate that, Captain, but I hope you understand that this mission is more than just diplomacy. There is much at stake, and I believe you and your crew will play a part in it." James's curiosity grew. "What exactly do you mean, Princess?" She smiled faintly, though there was an air of seriousness behind her gaze. "I can't explain everything yet, Captain, but I need you to trust me. I believe humans are destined for something great, something none of us can foresee. You have something the Empire has overlooked, and I need your help." Her words were cryptic, but they struck a chord deep within him. The weight of her statement hung in the air. Humans, destined for greatness. It was an idea he had never considered before, and yet it made him feel proud in a way he couldn't explain. The words lingered in his mind as the transmission ended and the screen flickered back to black. James stood there for a moment, staring at the blank screen. What did she mean by that? Was this mission really just about diplomacy, or was there something more going on? He couldn't help but feel as if he were caught in a much larger story, one that involved more than just the fate of Earth, but the future of the galaxy itself. He shook off the unsettling thoughts and turned to face the crew. They were all waiting for his next order, and he had to focus. "Status report, Lieutenant Harris." "Everything is running smoothly, Captain," Harris responded. "We'll reach the rendezvous point in just under 3 hours. The Princess's ship is still on course." James nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't ignore the strange connection he felt with Princess Aria. It was as if her words had awakened something inside him, a curiosity, a sense of purpose that had been buried beneath years of routine military service. Could humans really be destined for greatness? Could this mission lead them to something that would change everything? As the Vanguard glided smoothly through space, the crew continued their work, unaware of the deep thoughts swirling in their captain's mind. James knew that soon everything would change. The moment they met Princess Aria would mark the beginning of something much bigger than any of them could imagine. The next few hours felt like an eternity. James couldn't escape the feeling that they were racing toward a moment of destiny. The Vanguard cut through the stars, and with each passing second, the rendezvous point drew closer. The silence of space seemed to deepen, amplifying the tension and anticipation that hung in the air. When the time finally came, the Vanguard and Princess Aria's ship were in the same sector. James's hands tightened around the armrests of his chair. The moment of truth had arrived. The journey had only just begun, and yet it felt as though the fate of humanity rested on the decisions they would make in the coming hours. As the two ships moved closer, the crew of the Vanguard knew that their lives were about to change forever. What lay ahead was unknown, but one thing was certain. This was only the beginning of a journey that would shape the future of the galaxy and the future of humanity. As the Vanguard and Princess Aria's ship neared the rendezvous point, a sudden surge of tension filled the bridge. Captain James watched as the stars around them seemed to stretch and warp, the fabric of space bending in ways that were both fascinating and terrifying. There was something about the way the two ships were approaching that didn't feel right. The calm of the journey had suddenly been replaced by an eerie stillness, as if the universe itself held its breath. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission." Lieutenant Davis's voice broke through the tense silence. "It's a priority signal, encrypted." James's pulse quickened. "Put it through," he ordered, his eyes narrowing in focus. The screen flickered to life, revealing the face of a familiar figure, Princess Aria. However, this time, her expression was far more serious, even urgent. "Captain James," she said, her voice low, "you need to prepare your crew for something unexpected. The Empire has learned of my plans, and they are not pleased. We are being tracked." The words hit James like a punch to the stomach. "Tracked? By who?" he demanded, his mind racing. "By an advanced fleet of alien ships, Captain. They are unlike anything you've ever encountered. The Galactic Empire has sent them to intercept us, to prevent me from reaching Earth." Her eyes were filled with a mix of concern and determination. "They will stop at nothing to destroy us." The implications were clear. The mission, which had seemed so straightforward just hours ago, was now a life-or-death situation. James felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. He had been prepared for diplomacy. But this was a war. "Can we outrun them?" James asked, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "I don't know," Aria replied, her voice tight with fear. "Their ships are equipped with cloaking technology that makes them nearly invisible. They can attack without warning. We're at a disadvantage, but we can fight back. The only question is, how much time do we have?" The reality of the situation sank in. The crew of the Vanguard had trained for all kinds of threats, but nothing prepared them for a hidden enemy with technology far beyond their own. They were about to face an unknown threat, an alien force capable of striking without warning, without mercy. The Vanguard was a capable ship, but against an enemy that could blend into the darkness of space, its advanced weaponry might not be enough. "Understood," James said, his mind racing. "We'll get ready for battle. Tell me everything you know about their ships. We need to be prepared." Aria hesitated for a moment, clearly gathering her thoughts. "The ships they've sent are called the Dreadnoughts," she said, her voice grim. "They're heavily armed and shielded. They were built for one purpose: to hunt and destroy. The cloaking technology they use is perfect. Your sensors won't be able to detect them until they are almost on top of you. If you don't act quickly, they'll take us all out before we can even react." James could feel his heart pounding in his chest. His crew was experienced, but this was unlike any battle they had faced. They were about to be outmatched in every way imaginable. Still, he refused to let fear take over. He turned to his crew, who were watching him expectantly. "All right, people, we've got a fight on our hands. We don't know when they'll strike, but we're going to be ready. Prep all defensive systems and make sure we're on high alert. We may not be able to see them, but we can make sure they don't get the first shot." The crew sprang into action, moving quickly and efficiently. Their training had prepared them for this moment. Even though the odds were stacked against them, they were ready to defend their ship, and they would do it with everything they had. James's gaze locked onto the view of the distant stars. He knew they were in for a fight. The unknown enemy was closing in, and they were running out of time. Aria's ship, the Starfire, was not far behind. She had assured James that it was well equipped, but even with all of her technology, it would be a challenge to stand against the Dreadnoughts. They would need to rely on their wits and their speed, not just their weapons. The minutes ticked by in a slow, suffocating silence. Every officer on the Vanguard was working tirelessly, double-checking systems, and monitoring every part of the ship for signs of the enemy. The tension was palpable. Everyone knew that this battle would test them in ways they had never imagined. Then, a sudden alert came through the ship's sensors, and James's heart skipped a beat. "Captain, we have a confirmed reading," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice trained. "We've detected a ship, but it's cloaked. It's coming in fast." "Fire up the shields," James ordered immediately. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The ship's defenses came online with a loud hum, and the crew braced for impact. James gripped the armrests of his chair, his eyes scanning the monitors for any sign of the dreadnoughts. The ship rocked suddenly, as if hit by an invisible force, but there was no explosion. It was the first sign that the enemy had arrived, but they were still hidden, their cloaking technology making them nearly impossible to see. "We've been hit," Harris said, his voice tight with urgency. "Minor damage to the port side. We need to find their position. Now." James's mind raced. This was it. The battle for survival had begun. The Vanguard had to hold its ground. If they couldn't fight back effectively, the dreadnoughts would overwhelm them. His eyes flicked to the screen, waiting for the next move. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, knowing that his crew's lives depended on his next decisions. The Vanguard shuddered under another unseen hit, and Captain James gripped the armrest tightly. The invisible enemy was closing in fast, and with every passing second, the threat grew. The crew scrambled, working to keep the ship intact, but the pressure was mounting. The dreadnoughts were relentless. Out of sight, but everywhere at once. If they didn't act quickly, the Vanguard would be destroyed before they ever had a chance to retaliate. James stood from his seat and surveyed the chaos unfolding on the bridge. The lights flickered, warning lights blinked red, and the ship was barely holding together under the pounding of invisible blows. But the crew wasn't giving up. They were fighting back with everything they had, refusing to let their home, Earth, be taken without a fight. "Lieutenant Davis, status report," James said, his voice calm despite the turmoil around him. He had to keep his head in the game, for his crew and for the mission. Davis turned toward him, sweat dripping down his face. "We've sustained minor damage, sir. Shields are holding for now, but I don't know how much longer they'll last. The dreadnoughts are still cloaked, but I'm seeing signs of their energy signature. If we can pinpoint where they're coming from, we might have a chance to retaliate." James nodded. That was the key. They needed to track down the enemy before it was too late. "Get the AI systems running. Use every last bit of power to boost our sensors. We need to find them." He turned to Princess Aria, who stood nearby, watching with a worried expression. "Your ship has the same systems, right?" he asked. "Can you assist?" Aria nodded, her face serious. "Yes, Captain. My ship can detect the energy signature of the dreadnoughts by analyzing their cloaking technology. I will help, but it will take time. We're working with limited resources." James understood. Time was something they didn't have. The dreadnoughts could strike again at any moment, and if they were still invisible, it would be impossible to defend themselves. But the situation was growing more desperate, and the enemy was getting bolder. He had to keep his crew motivated, even if the odds were stacked against them. As the crew worked tirelessly to boost the sensors, an idea suddenly struck James. He glanced at the tactical readout on the screen. If the dreadnoughts relied on energy signatures to cloak themselves, maybe they could use that to their advantage. What if they could overload the cloaking field, disrupt their systems, and force them into the open? "Lieutenant Harris," James called out, his voice steady. "Prepare to overload the energy reserves. Target the dreadnoughts' energy signatures. We'll flood their cloaking field with a surge of energy. It'll make them visible, even for a moment." Harris's eyes widened, understanding the plan instantly. "It's risky, but it just might work. I'll start recalibrating the energy grid." "Good," James said. He turned to the rest of the crew. "Everyone, brace yourselves. If this works, we're going to hit them hard and fast. We've got one shot at this, and we can't afford to fail." The tension in the air was thick as the crew worked quickly to execute the plan. James watched as Aria's ship came into sync with the Vanguard, its advanced systems feeding valuable data back into their own. The two ships would work together to overload the cloaking technology, and if it worked, it would give them the chance to strike back. As the seconds ticked by, the crew scrambled to complete their preparations. The Vanguard was shaking under constant fire from the dreadnoughts, but they were still holding on. James could see the strain in his crew's faces. No one was giving up. They were all determined to fight, to survive, and to protect their home. "Ready," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice tight with anticipation. "Overloading the system now." A deep hum filled the ship as the energy reserves began to surge. The ship's systems began to glow brighter, the power levels climbing higher than they had ever been pushed before. The air on the bridge was thick with electricity as the Vanguard began its final push. They were about to make their move. The ship trembled again as the energy surge was sent out, a massive wave of power aimed directly at the cloaking dreadnoughts. The air was thick with tension as they waited for the results. Then, just as it seemed like the moment would stretch on forever, the impossible happened. A flash of light cut through the darkness of space, followed by a powerful burst of energy that erupted from the heart of the dreadnought fleet. One of the enemy ships materialized before them, its massive hull now fully visible. The cloak had been broken. "Yes," Davis shouted, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It worked. We've got them." James felt a rush of triumph, but there was no time to savor the victory. They had only a split second before the dreadnought would retaliate. "Fire everything we've got," he commanded, his voice loud and firm. The Vanguard's weapon systems fired in unison, the sheer force of the blasts tearing through the empty space. The enemy ship rocked under the onslaught, but the dreadnought wasn't down yet. The battle had only just begun. Aria's ship joined in, its own weapons joining the fight. For the first time since the battle began, the crew of the Vanguard felt a spark of hope. They had turned the tide, and the enemy was now in their sights. It wasn't over, but the first step toward victory had been taken. James watched as the dreadnought tried to regain its balance, the ship's cloaking technology now useless. The tide was turning, and for the first time in hours, he felt the weight of the situation begin to lift. This was a chance, perhaps the only chance, to win. "Keep firing. Don't let up," James ordered, his eyes locked on the screen. "We finish this now." The battle raged on, but in the heart of space, a new hope had been born. The battle had been fierce, but as the last of the dreadnought fleet turned into a cloud of debris, silence fell over the battlefield. The Vanguard and Aria's ship were the only ones left standing, floating in the dark emptiness of space. The crew, weary and bruised from hours of fighting, let out collective breaths of relief. It was over. For now. Captain James stood on the bridge, his eyes focused on the screen in front of him. The mission had been a success, but the cost of victory weighed heavily on his shoulders. The crew had lost good men and women during the fight, and even though they had won, it was clear that the war was far from over. This victory, however, had shifted the balance in their favor. "Captain." Aria's voice broke through his thoughts, and he turned to face her. The alien princess stood by the command center, her beautiful face reflecting the solemnity of the moment. "We've won, but the dreadnoughts were just the beginning. There are many more out there, and they will not stop until Earth is taken." James nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of her words. He knew this wasn't just about one battle, it was about the future of Earth and humanity's place in the galaxy. The dreadnoughts were a threat, but they were not the only one. The galaxy was full of dangers, and humans had just proven that they were not to be underestimated. "What do we do now?" James asked, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. He had led his crew to victory, but the road ahead was uncertain. They couldn't rest yet, not while there were so many unknowns out there. Aria stepped closer, her gaze meeting his. "Now we prepare. The Galactic Empire will retaliate, and they will come at us with everything they have. But you, Captain James, have proven something important today. You have shown that humanity can stand up against the most powerful forces in the galaxy. That is something they will not forget." James felt a surge of pride. For so long, humanity had been seen as weak, insignificant, and easy to conquer. But today, they had proven their strength. They had shown the galaxy that humans were a force to be reckoned with. It was the start of something bigger, something that would change the course of history. "I'll do whatever it takes," James said, his voice firm. "We'll fight. We'll protect Earth." Arya smiled, her eyes glowing with a mix of admiration and hope. "I knew I chose the right humans to ally with. You are not just warriors. You are survivors, and that makes all the difference." James turned back to the screen, where the remnants of the dreadnoughts floated lifelessly in space. The enemy might have been defeated, but the war was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. He knew that Earth would face more challenges, more battles, and more threats from powerful enemies in the galaxy. But with the lessons they had learned, with the strength they had shown, humanity was ready for what was to come. "Send word to Earth," James commanded. "Let them know that we've won this battle. But the war is far from over. They need to prepare. The future of humanity depends on it." As the communication channels opened, James turned to Arya. "We'll need your help. Together, we can protect Earth and show the galaxy that humanity is more than just a target. We are a force of our own." Arya nodded. "I will stand with you, Captain. Together, we will make sure that Earth's future is secured." The stars outside the window of the Vanguard glimmered like a sea of endless possibilities. The future of Earth had been uncertain, but now it was filled with hope. The victory in the battle against the dreadnoughts had been a turning point, a new beginning for humanity. The galaxy would no longer see humans as weak, and the people of Earth would not be intimidated by the advanced technology of the alien empires. James knew that this victory was only the beginning. The fight for Earth's survival was just starting, but he had confidence in his crew and his allies. With the strength, courage, and determination they had shown today, he knew they could face anything the galaxy threw their way. In the distance, the Vanguard and Arya's ship sailed toward Earth, their mission far from over. The road ahead was uncertain, but Captain James and his crew were ready to defend their home, no matter the cost. Earth had shown that it was not just a blue dot in the vastness of space. It was a force to be reckoned with. As the ships headed back toward Earth, James looked out at the stars once more. The future was uncertain, but with the strength of humanity and the power of their newfound alliances, Earth's place in the galaxy was secure. The future of Earth and of humanity had just begun, and it was bright.